Good afternoon. My name is Marcin Stachyra, and it is my pleasure and a great honor to be among the participants of conference titled Media in America, America in Media. I deeply appreciate the invitation from the organizing committee of Maria Curie Skłodowska University in Lublin, where I had studied law, and then some years later I took doctoral studies in the field of social communication. Of course, this honor of speaking here to you as a keynote is not deserved by me as yet, but I will do my best to earn it. Let me briefly introduce myself. Apart from my radio experience, which was quite a long time ago, my current dealing with the media industry relates to work with three projects. Bona Notitia Foundation, which aims to support and empower local journalism. For Media LLC, which is a Nevada-based software solutions provider for the local media outlets, and the forthcoming project titled For Community Online, which will be launched later this year and will be dedicated to the local communities. When asked to take part in the conference about the media in America, several headlines instantly flashed through my mind. The claim of local press, fake news, social versus traditional media, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, growing domination of tech giants, COVID-19, freedom of press, Black Lives Matters, and so on and so on. In fact, all of them were tempting enough, therefore I finally decided to use a bit of each, and hence the title of this short address. I think all those issues intersect, and what I'm going to do here is to give a glimpse of a bigger picture from the perspective of an outsider, because I do not represent an American company. My point of view is European, is Polish. All right. I was looking for some words of wisdom, some great quote underlining the importance of free press in America, and I came upon this one by one of the founding fathers. As you see, the fake news are not the invention of 21st century. The term itself may be indeed quite new, but before our times, the generations of readers on many occasions witnessed misinformation, deliberate lies, or other forms of propaganda. It was the matter of access to the different sources and confronting them in search for the plausible explanation. Seeking the truth was always a challenge, and it was never easy. Anyway, when the press is free and each of us are able to read, which means also to understand what we read, we can say that the environment we live in is safe. We can discuss and argue to seek the truth. The free press was a cornerstone of a society of free people who embraced democracy at many levels, local, state, or federal. Therefore, every county across the USA had a couple of newspapers. They advocated different opinions, sometimes very fiercely. They were the watchdogs, they were demanding, and despite their flaws, they were the force to be reckoned with. As I stated before, my main professional interest now has been in the local media, primarily the press. So in the previous years, I had the chance of participating in many conferences and trade shows dedicated to the local media across the United States and Canada. Some were held by nationwide organizations like National Newspaper Association or Local Media Association. Other were state press associations. And I took the opportunity to visit media events from San Diego through Las Vegas to Fort Worth in Texas, or from Alberta through Quebec to Toronto in Canada. We, as for media, attended conferences in the Midwest and in the Louisiana in the South, and all we can say that their tradition is huge, is long, and some of the events were celebrating over 160 years of continuous annual gatherings. Different parts of the map, but what we've heard were the common problems for all of them. We lose readers, we earn less money, we are aging as editors and as readers, and we cannot compete with the big players. How can we combine our localness with online globalization? How can we produce good quality news when then we have to give it away for free or nobody seems to care? Those were the sorts of questions we've heard all along the lines. Local media owners and editors' intuition of being in crisis has a solid proof. It's not just their imagination or observation. The group of researchers conducted by Penelope Hughes Abernethy, who is a Knight Chair in Journalism and Digital Media Economics in Local Media School of Media and Journalism at the University of North Carolina, has been analyzing the main trends on the US market of the local newspapers since 2004. In 2016, the first report in the series of publications dedicated to the disturbing changes on the local newspaper market had been published under the title "The Rise of a New Media Baron and the Emerging Threat of News Deserts." 2 years later, the expanding news desert gave another insight into the problem of local media. Within 15 years, nearly 1,800 newspapers evaporated, 600 dailies and 1,700 weeklies. Less titles also mean a drop in the weekly circulation. It declined from 122 million to 73 million. It's dropped by 30%. The vast majority of remaining papers, around 5,500, have a circulation of less than 15,000, which means their range is limited and still shrinking. This phenomenon was labeled news deserting, and dedicated website usnewsdesert.com was created to raise the awareness of this disturbing trend. It struck all the states without exception, but particularly the South, who has the most counties without newspapers, 91 in total. Almost every state in the South had at least one news desert, and this part of the USA is in general poorer than average. According to Stanford University economist James Hamilton, the residents of low-income areas tend to be overlooked by advertisers, are less likely to purchase subscriptions, and have less access to both legacy and digital media. This has long-term social and economic consequences for rural communities in particular. Since residents in news deserts tend to be less informed about key issues in their community, they are less likely to vote and less likely to control the local powers. Counties that lost their last surviving newspaper ranged from Jerome County in Idaho with 22,000 residents to Mays County in Oklahoma with 40,000 residents. The 1,449 counties with only one newspaper still publishing range from Arthur County in Nebraska with just 500 residents to Montgomery County in Maryland with more than 1 million people. The residents of America's emerging news deserts are often those the most vulnerable. They are generally poorer, older, and less educated than the average American. They are much more likely to live in rural areas of the county. So something positive. And the positive thing is that some new enterprises try to fill the gap. A variety of legacy and startup news outlets came up to fill the local news void, but still too few of them. In 2020, UNC researchers examined the state of the country's 525 online news outlets, 950 ethnic media, and 1,400 public broadcasting stations. Their pioneering efforts hold promise, but the challenge is finding a way to scale their efforts. Another thing, which is sometimes overlooked, is that those who remain are often the subject of buyouts from the bigger media networks. In 2018, 25 major media outlets owned nearly 2,200 newspapers, over 30% in total, and they controlled 29 out of 73 million circulation, which is nearly 40% in total. In the months following the report, that is until early 2020, another 300 newspapers were closed. Staff reductions were continuous. Circulation declined by another 5 million copies, while the number of new online local sites was equal to those who ceased their activities. And then, out of sudden, this little fellow came up. We had a pandemic and the following further closures. So the current picture is very bleak indeed. Local press in the US is the endangered species. In only 2 decades, the technological and economic assaults have destroyed the for-profit business model that sustained local journalism in this country for 2 centuries. Hundreds of news organizations, century-old newspapers, as well as nascent digital sites simply have vanished. And this is a real extinction. So, how the present landscape look like? Over the past 15 years, the United States has lost 2,100 newspapers, leaving at least 1,800 communities that had a local news outlet in 2004 without any at the beginning of 2020. Most of those losses were weeklies in economically struggling communities. Half of newspaper readers and half of journalists have also vanished over the past 15 years. Many of the country's 6,700 surviving papers have become so-called ghost newspapers. They were just shells of their former selves with greatly diminished newsrooms and readership. The loss of both journalists and circulation speaks to the declining influence of local newspapers and raises questions about their long-term financial viability in a digital era. There is a critical need for more funding of for-profit, non-profit and publicly funded business models for startups emerging in the market of local news. Otherwise, they too may not survive. Massive consolidation in the newspaper industry has shifted both editorial and business decisions to a few large corporations without strong ties to the communities where their papers are located. As in many cases profitability has replaced journalism's civic mission, trust in local media has also declined. More details can be found in the latest report from 2020 titled The News Landscape in 2020 and followed by the book News Deserts and Ghost Newspapers, Will Local News Survive? By the University of North Carolina Press. But at the same time, when local news struggle, the tech giants flourish. 5 largest technological companies in the United States, which are Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Apple and Amazon, hold a combined market value of $7.5 trillion. But not only these big numbers are overwhelming. Just take a look at its dynamics, especially in the COVID months. Alphabet, for your information, is the company that owns brands like Google, Android, etc. Apparently, during the pandemic, they are growing even faster. You can see 2 lockdown drops, but they were shortly overcome. And between the end of 2019 and now, they have become bigger by 52%. At the same time, when the world is in its majority went online, they were here with their offers, news and new services and platforms included. And those who managed to catch up with the latest trends and jump onto the bandwagon could win something out of this. So what were those trends? How the big tech changed the news consumption? And what are the news now? According to the World Association of News Publishers, who analyzed the major trends, you can name at least 5 key features of new mode of news consumption. They are the brevity of contact, community and interaction, growth in audio content, domination of visual elements, and higher level of personalization. And let me now briefly go through them. News consumption on mobile grows exponentially, but each visit is for a relatively short period of time. According to Pew Research, consumers now spend an average 2.5 minutes per visit, which means 10% decline since 2015. 2 minutes and 30 seconds means that if the publisher is an old-school hardcore and does not use any graphs, audio, or video, but it means that you get a single page of pure text to go through. No surprise then that many online publishers put the tag long read to warn the reader how difficult the task is ahead. 5 minutes maybe, or God forbid 10. And no such pain when the reader or user can interact with the content. And this is because the value of content is shifting from content itself to the interaction with content. It means that people are more willingly to pay for interaction with news. It may have a form of paywall, as many online newspapers do, where some sections are available only to the subscribers. But beside that, new interactive services appear, like, for instance, Clubhouse, OnlyFans, Patreon, and many others. And they get more and more attention from their audiences. Each of aforementioned is a bit different, but the common denominators are the community aspect and interactive mode. A Clubhouse is a live voice chat application available through the Apple Store, and people can join it only by invitation and discuss with each other in thematic rooms. OnlyFans is an app where fans of specific content creator can view their works for a monthly subscription fee. Patreon, on the other hand, is addressed to content creators and provides them with business tools to run a subscription service. And interesting, podcasts and other audio products are doing quite well. More than 50 million homes in the US are equipped with smart speakers. More than 50% of the cars in the US market house either Android Auto or Apple CarPlay to facilitate the audio experience. And just in 2020, Apple sold 100 million of their AirPods. Decades ago, some claimed that the radio was dead, but it has proved otherwise. It often may not be called radio anymore in the traditional meaning of the word, but certainly the spirit of the radio is still alive. Music, podcasts, and spoken words are okay in the world of modern media. Apart from audio, there is a significant growth in visuals of many kinds. Data-driven graphics appear more frequently in all media, press included. Videos shot on mobile phones became a major storytelling tool. You can name George Floyd murder or Black Lives Matter protests, and they gathered initial attention through mobile phone shot videos. Unsurprisingly, YouTube has more viewers under the age of 50 in America than all the TV channels combined. And tons of pictures everywhere. More than 1.5 billion of photos are uploaded daily to Google, Facebook, and Instagram. And finally, something that brings us back to the combination of journalism with the social media. Hyper-local journalism, as it is called, is making a comeback from applications that have embraced geolocation software with artificial intelligence, improving the quality of personalized content. The US is seeing an explosion in hyperlocal news apps with the ones like Citizen, Nextdoor, and Newsbreak ranking among the top 10 most used news applications, including the social media. Citizen, for instance, is a sort of alarm application for the local communities. It notifies people to evacuate burning buildings, allows its user to inform others of a crime in progress before the police have responded. Nextdoor, which was founded in 2017, is the neighborhood hub for trusted connections and the exchange of helpful information, goods and services. And Newsbreak, who has over 45 million users just in the US, dives on access to the local breaking news, latest trending news, and national news. Okay, we have a number of available platforms, plenty of tools, but again, who creates the actual news and who is going to pay the creators. Let's take a short trip to Australia, where a few weeks ago the government passed the News Media and Digital Platforms Mandatory Bargaining Code, which is a law that could push Facebook and Google to pay publishers if they host their content. This law's aim was to encourage tech giants and media companies to bargain payment deals, obligating Facebook and Google to invest tens of millions of dollars in local digital content. Google agreed, but when the Australians checked their Facebook feeds on 18th of February, they could not find anything from either major or minor Australian newspapers, but also from the Bureau of Meteorology, Western Australia's Department of Fire, and any emergency services. This all happened in the middle of the fire season and the COVID pandemic, for which many people rely on Facebook for updates. A couple of days later, Facebook had reversed its own decision, but the problem remained. The fact is that behind the Australian government's proposal is another giant, Rupert Murdoch's News Limited, which owns more than half of Australia's newspaper market. So the other half of this market may say, I don't care, the two big players are fighting each other and it's not my business. But nevertheless, is it okay that one giant player has the power to cut off the access to its platform for all media services of one sovereign country? Future legal battles over the power of tech giants seem unavoidable. In October last year, the Department of Justice, along with 11 state attorneys general, filed a civil antitrust lawsuit to stop Google from unlawfully maintaining monopolies through anti-competitive and exclusionary practices in the search and search advertising markets, and to remedy the competitive harms. On the slide, you can see some of the practices that Google is accused with, but how do they influence the media? They live mostly on the income from the advertisement, but the centralized distribution of online ads makes them more vulnerable than ever. Online advertising market is growing exponentially, but the local media are not necessarily its main beneficiaries. And a few words about the press freedom. The outsiders like me used to imagine the United States as a country where press can enjoy more freedom than anywhere else in the world. It is protected by law, and they have a transparent government which is obliged to answer the questions with no hesitation. The real picture is not that naively bright, hence the initiatives like this one. News Media for Open Government, NMOG, is a broad coalition of news media and journalism organizations working to ensure laws, policies and practices preserve and protect freedom of the press, open government and the free flow of information in the US. They called on the US Congress and the new administration to promote policies that bolster the First Amendment, a free press, and a more transparent and open government. 5 key issues of this address are that freedom of the press should be supported, not stigmatized. The free flow of information should be preserved and strengthened. The Freedom of Information Act should be reinforced and enhanced. The coalition acts against overclassification, unconstrained non-disclosure agreements, and other forms of secrecy that thwart the public's right to know. Protection of confidential sources. We used to think that the protection of confidential sources is sacrosanct in the US legal system. In fact, things look quite differently, and it's not unlikely for journalists to go to jail for withholding information about their confidential sources of information. Therefore, the NMOG encourages the new administration to support the principle that journalists will not be prosecuted for doing their jobs or protecting their confidential sources. And journalists should be the last resort, not the first, when federal law enforcement is seeking information in an investigation. And finally, they urge the administration to reverse a recent Department of Homeland Security rule that would limit the length of time foreign journalists can stay in the United States and create a troubling process where the government would review a journalist's work product before granting a visa extension. And something important about the access to free speech, very briefly though, as I believe we are running out of time. But while the US administration has done a lot of damage to the freedom of information, it appeared that even the President of the United States can be limited in his speech. At his final days in the White House, Donald Trump, still President of the US, elected in 2016 and off-going 4 years later, was banned from Twitter. His comments on the Capitol riots were the main excuse. Soon after that, he moved his account to another platform called Parler, but not for long. This time, not only his account was cancelled, but the whole platform. In January, Parler was banned from the Google Play and Apple Store, and Amazon cut Parler off from its cloud hosting services. The pretext was the lack of proper moderation from the Parler's admins. But it seems a bit vague. How far should we go into moderating without actually censoring what we do not like? While Parler might be viewed as a vessel for many extreme political views, the same hardly could be said about the New York Times, the largest newspaper in the USA, certainly by far more liberal than conservative. Yet, the question of freedom of speech also appeared there, as Barry Weiss, the editor of Opinion section, resigned from her position a few months ago. In her letter of resignation, she gave the reasons for that. Her main objection was to the new consensus that emerged, that truth isn't a process of collective discovery, but an orthodoxy already known to an enlightened few whose job is to inform everyone else. Giving voice to opinion we disagree with, to know them and to challenge them, then seems to be a vanishing virtue, not just in the New York Times. And this all combined gives us a somewhat depressing picture on the role of news in the present-day America. With communities and local media disconnected from their roots, communities more often replaced by the identities, with gatekeeping role of the big tech as the main news providers or fake news as the excuse for censorship, with collective thinking and bipartisan approach in media, many of readers seem at lost. Data abundance does not mean better understanding of the world we live in. But in the end, let me say something maybe naive, but hopefully a bit uplifting. Maybe we'll manage to learn something from history. Tom Rosenstiel, a journalist and executive director of the American Press Institute, pointed out, in the sensationalist late 19th century of yellow journalism, Joe Pulitzer hyped the news on the front pages. At the same time, Pulitzer and other publishers like E.W. Scripps used their editorial pages to teach citizenship. Someone who could read English would read the paper out loud to those who couldn't. The news was about involving people and creating community. And isn't community an essential antidote to chaos? I like these words very much. I believe in importance of community, and I believe that we must not cease our efforts in learning how to read modern media, not pretending we understand all of it. We should teach where we can, but we should not preach. We must be allowed to criticize and oppose, and allow ourselves to be criticized and opposed. I don't think that having different opinions and arguing creates chaos. Quite the contrary. With our goodwill, it may help us understand each other and bring us out of chaos step by step. It is a noble effort. Thank you very much for your patience and attention, and I am looking forward to your questions.